You lying, cheating fraud. Laura's high-pitched voice yelled through my cell phone. I stared in shock at the unknown number on my screen. I was frozen, standing on the carpet in my living room. Excuse me? I finally said, completely stunned by the angry outburst from my husband's sister, Laura, a person I barely knew. Don't play dumb with me, she continued. I have proof you stole over $300,000 from my father's company. Did you really think you'd get away with it? I slowly sank to the floor as her accusations kept coming, my heart pounding. Stolen money?
What was she talking about?
I tried to make sense of her words. Yes, I'd been helping my father-in-law Adam with his struggling financial business lately since I'd married Scott 5 months ago. But steal money? Laura, I honestly don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice pleading. There must be a mistake. She cut me off sharply. Oh, I understand just fine. And if you think you're going to get away with this, you're dead wrong. I'm calling my lawyer and the police. You're going to pay for this. She hung up. I stared at my phone, stunned. Laura's words echoing in my mind. Embezzlement? Police? It didn't make any sense. Why would she think I'd do something like that? My hands were shaking as I tried to call Scott, desperate to make sense of all this. But his phone went straight to voicemail. I remembered, with a sinking feeling, that he was away on a business trip. I was on my own, facing Laura's wild accusations. For the next hour, I paced around the house, feeling a mix of fear and confusion. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but I had no idea how to prove it, or why Laura was coming at me like this. We barely knew each other. Why would she target me? Soon, my phone buzzed with a text from Scott's cousin, Rachel. She asked if I was going to Adam's 83th birthday barbecue that weekend. My heart sank even more. If Laura wanted to accuse me of stealing, what better place to do it than in front of the entire family? I thought about staying home, avoiding the possible public humiliation. But I knew hiding would only make me look guilty. I had to stand up to Laura and her wild accusations, for myself and for my marriage. That Sunday, my hands were still shaking as I got dressed for the party. I chose a simple navy dress, not wanting to give Laura any extra reasons to attack me. As I drove to Adam's big estate, my nerves grew, but I refused to let fear take over. I had done nothing wrong, and I was determined to make Laura see that, even if it meant facing her in front of the whole family. The party was already in full swing. When I arrived, Adam's face lit up as he saw me, and he pulled me into a warm hug. Emma, so glad you could make it, he said cheerfully. Can you believe I'm this old? I managed a small smile, wishing I could actually enjoy celebrating with him. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Laura across the lawn, watching me with a smug look. My stomach tightened. This was it. Time to face her. Taking a shaky breath, I gathered my courage and walked straight toward her. As I approached, Laura raised an eyebrow, her expression cold. Before I could say anything, she grabbed a microphone from a nearby table, tapping it loudly to get everyone's attention. Sorry to interrupt, but I have an important announcement about the guest of honor's daughter-in-law, she said, her voice loud. People turned to look, curiosity and surprise on their faces. Emma here, she continued, glaring at me and pointing for everyone to see, has stolen over $300,000 from the family. The crowd gasped. I stood there, frozen, my mouth open as all eyes fixed on me with disbelief and suspicion. My heart was racing, pounding in my ears. Laura, what is going on? Scott demanded, rushing over to stand between us. I blinked, grateful tears filling my eyes at the sight of my husband, though he looked confused. Yeah, what's going on, Laura? Someone else called out, and a nervous murmur spread through the guests. My knees felt weak as I held onto Scott's hand like a lifeline. Laura raised her hands, her gaze icy. I got a notice from the bank last week, she said. When I looked into it, I found transfers from the company account straight into Emma's personal account. That can't be true, I said to the crowd, finding my voice. I would never steal anything, especially not from family. Oh, really? Laura sneered. Because I have bank records that show otherwise. She waved some papers in the air, and I felt the blood rush in my ears. This couldn't be happening. Scott squeezed my hand, his brows furrowed. Clearly, there's some kind of mistake. Let's sit down and look at these records. I'm sure Emma can explain. A mistake? Laura shot back. You believe your wife over your own sister? The proof is right here. She held up the papers as angry whispers filled the crowd. My eyes filled with tears. Was Scott starting to doubt me too? Hey, let's not jump to conclusions before we have all the facts. Our cousin Walter spoke up, trying to keep things calm. Some family members nodded, agreeing, saying maybe it was a bank error. The bank didn't take $300,000. She did. Laura yelled, pointing at me. A few relatives nodded, giving me suspicious looks. Humiliated, I felt the tears spill down my cheeks. This couldn't be real. Just then, Adam stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. Though he looked frail, his voice was strong. I know my daughter-in-law Emma is innocent, Adam declared. A few family members clapped, and my tears turned to gratitude for his faith in me, though I still felt anxious. What proof did I really have? Laura just scoffed. You're a foolish old man for trusting her over real evidence. That gold-digging fraud married Scott just to get access to our accounts. Anger surged through me. The stress, the confusion, and Laura's public attack had finally pushed me over the edge. Clearly, Laura hated me, though I barely knew her. But why was she making these serious accusations? What did she want? Before I could respond, Laura grabbed her phone from her fancy designer bag and started pressing buttons aggressively. That's it, she snapped. I'm calling the cops. Fear and adrenaline rushed through me. This had gone too far. Just then, Scott stepped in and grabbed her phone, ending the call before she could finish. Laura's mouth dropped open in shock, and the crowd fell silent. I think we all need to pause and calmly look at the facts, Scott said steadily, though I noticed a slight tremor in his voice. He pulled me close, and I held on to him, trying to hold back my sobs. Let's meet tomorrow, he continued, after I've had time to go over these bank statements and Emma can share her side. I'm sure we can handle this without getting the police involved. I exhaled, beyond grateful for Scott's calm reaction. Maybe he still believed I was innocent after all. But as I looked around at the relatives gathered there, all I saw were doubtful and suspicious eyes. This ambush felt like just the beginning of Laura's attack, and I needed to find a way to prove the truth before she tore my whole life apart. The next few weeks dragged by in slow motion. Laura's public accusations had started rumors that followed me everywhere I went. At the hair salon, the grocery store, even with our neighbors, everyone gave me uneasy glances. At home, tension filled the air. Scott buried himself in piles of financial records, trying to find answers to the strange transactions Laura had pointed out. I could tell he was struggling with doubt whenever he looked at me. For now, we were living in Adam's large house to care for him since he had been diagnosed with cancer. But being under the same roof as Laura made me feel worse every day. She took every chance she could to insult me, even slamming doors in my face. I jumped whenever I heard her voice echo down the long hallways. The constant conflict seemed to wear on Adam's health, and soon he stopped coming out of his room altogether. One evening, as I was preparing his dinner tray, I heard Laura's loud voice from the hallway. I froze, a glass of orange juice in my hand. Emma clearly tricked you into putting her name on your will and giving her power over your health care, Laura was saying. She's just trying to control your money while you're weak from chemo. My mouth dropped open in shock. Was she now accusing me of taking advantage of my father-in-law's illness? Laura, must you always assume the worst about Emma? Adam replied, sounding exhausted. I asked her to help me get my affairs in order, because I trust her. You're making a huge mistake, trusting that greedy liar over your own family, Laura shot back. I couldn't hold back any longer. I marched down the hall, anger bubbling over. I set the tray down hard on the table, some juice spilling over the edge. How dare you question how I care for Adam? I said, my voice trembling. I've done nothing but dedicate myself to this family. It's low, even for you. Laura straightened, standing a few inches taller than me, but her attitude made her seem much bigger. Her eyes were fierce. You wormed your way into this family with those innocent eyes and sweet words just to get your hands on Adam's fortune, she hissed, stepping closer. But you won't succeed while I'm here to protect what's rightfully mine. Suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't about me. It was about her wanting to secure her own inheritance. Anger and frustration rose in my chest.
So that's what all this is really about.
I demanded. You're just trying to get Adam's money by discrediting me? Laura scoffed. It's only discrediting if it's a lie. Go ahead, play the victim. Let's see who Adam believes when I show him proof of those late-night cash withdrawals going straight into your shopping sprees. My hands clenched at my sides. I had to stop this before things got worse. You planted fake evidence to make me look guilty, so you could take control, I accused. Just admit that this is all a setup before you do any real harm. Laura stepped closer until I could smell her floral perfume, her glare icy and intense. The only harm being done is you bleeding my family dry with your lies. But don't worry, she said, her voice cold. I will expose you if it's the last thing I do. I will, she vowed, her cold conviction sending a chill down my spine. She swept out of the room before I could say anything to defend myself. I sank into a chair, my heart pounding. This made it clear. Laura wouldn't stop her personal vendetta until she got what she wanted. I had to act fast to protect myself and Scott, but I feared her lies had already caused too much damage. The web she spun felt too thick to break through. If I didn't find a way to clear my name soon, I might lose everything. Clenching my fists, I knew I couldn't let Laura win. Over the next week, I felt restless, unable to shake Laura's threat. Her lies seemed to be strangling my marriage and my peace of mind. I had to fight back. Late one night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I crept into Adam's dusty home office. Moonlight streamed through the windows as I searched through the heavy wooden desk. There had to be some records of the family company's finances that could prove my innocence. The air felt thick and heavy as I went through pile after pile of papers, using the dim light from my phone. Dust floated through the narrow beam like tiny ghosts from the past. I held back a cough, careful not to make a sound. Come on, I muttered, my eyes straining as the files blurred together in the darkness. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a thick manila folder jammed in the back of a drawer. I pulled it out and opened it, instantly recognizing Adam's handwriting. These were records of financial transfers related to an offshore account set up as a tax shelter. Everything looked normal at first, until I noticed that this account had been closed right before Laura's accusations against me started. My heart raced as I flipped through the papers. I'd hit the jackpot. The records showed a large cash deposit into a new account just before the offshore account was closed. And the listed owner? Laura. My blood ran cold as I read further. There was also a bank statement showing an 8-figure withdrawal from the family business's main account, more than triple the amount I was accused of taking. The money had been split up into smaller accounts and then gathered into Laura's offshore fund. I sank back on my heels, my hands shaking. This was undeniable proof that Laura had set me up to hide her own massive theft. Anger burned inside me. Thanks to her lies, I had endured weeks of public humiliation and lost the trust of my husband and father-in-law, all while she quietly stole enough money to live a luxurious life. The realization made me feel sick. Just then, I noticed smaller withdrawals from the family accounts over the past month. My anger flared as I realized what this meant. Even after building her own offshore fortune, Laura kept draining the family's funds out of pure spite and greed. My heart ached as anger mixed with sadness. Scott and I had once dreamed of taking over the family business and bringing it back to success. But with Laura's theft going unchecked, bankruptcy was right around the corner. We could lose everything because of her endless greed. Not if I could help it. A fierce determination rose in me. I would protect this family from financial ruin, no matter the cost. Carefully, I put the records back where I found them and crept upstairs with a spark of a plan forming in my mind. But just as I reached our bedroom, I heard muffled sobs. I turned and saw Scott slumped on the couch, his face buried in his hands. My heart broke for him. I was about to call out when he started speaking, his voice choked with pain. I promised till death do us part, he whispered. But how can I keep that vow if I don't even know who I married? His words cut me deeply. He truly doubted me now, unsure of what was real or not after all the lies Laura had spread. My strong husband, reduced to this vulnerable state by her schemes, looked so lost. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, to tell him how much I loved him, so we could face Laura together. But my chance to comfort him slipped away when Laura suddenly appeared, stepping out of the shadows. "Stop defending that backstabbing fraud," she told him coldly. "I warned you. Emma only cares about herself. Now, let's talk about taking her out of the will before she takes you for everything." I swallowed an angry gasp and shrank back, hoping she wouldn't see me. Fury overtook any sadness I felt. It was clear now that Laura wouldn't stop her attack until she got exactly what she wanted. It was time to turn the tables and make her pay. I refused to let her win. Morning came gray and gloomy, matching my mood as I wandered the garden, still shaken by everything I'd learned the night before. Though anger simmered in me, one clear truth stood out. I couldn't defeat Laura on my own. She had woven a web of lies that no one dared question. To bring her down, I needed help. I sat on a cold stone bench, piecing together the start of a plan. One possible ally came to mind, Kelly, Adam's former assistant. She had quit years ago, furious after Adam gave Laura a promotion she felt she deserved. Kelly's knowledge of the company could be just the ammunition I needed. After some searching, I found her contact information. My hands shook slightly as I dialed her number that afternoon. "Kelly, it's Emma." When Kelly answered, I spoke carefully, taking a deep breath. "Sorry for calling out of nowhere, but I really need your help." I expected her to hesitate or maybe say no, but Kelly agreed to meet at a quiet cafe the next morning. I arrived early, feeling a mix of nerves and hope. Kelly came right on time, carrying 3 steaming cups of coffee. I felt relieved. This felt right. As I shared everything that had happened, her sharp eyes softened with sympathy. Her lips pressed into a thin line when I mentioned Laura. "I'm so sorry you got dragged into that family's mess," she said, shaking her head. When Adam chose Laura over me for VP, I knew her greed would lead to trouble. I leaned forward, hopeful. "So you're not surprised by her accusing me of stealing?" Kelly scoffed. "Not at all. She's always resented Adam's money, thinking it should all go to her. I tried to warn him about her, but he wouldn't see it." My heart sped up. "So you think she'd actually try to frame me?" I asked. Kelly nodded firmly. "Absolutely. She hates anyone she sees as a threat. With you in the family, I'm sure she saw her chance slipping away." Hearing Kelly confirm my suspicions gave me a spark of hope. Maybe I wasn't fighting Laura alone. I explained how I had found records showing Laura had been moving family money into an offshore account for years. Kelly said she'd seen strange financial moves during her time working for Adam, but hadn't realized how it all connected. "I knew something was wrong, happening right under Adam's nose," Kelly said, anger flashing in her eyes. "But Laura turned him against me before I could prove anything." My mind raced as we connected the pieces. With Kelly's knowledge and the evidence I'd found, we had everything we needed to expose Laura. I met Kelly's steady gaze. "Will you help me convince Adam and Scott of the truth?" I asked. "Together, we can finally prove Laura's been lying all this time." Kelly straightened, her expression firm. "I'm all in. Laura ruined my career and my reputation. It's time for her to face justice." We spent the afternoon planning. Kelly agreed to quietly dig for more evidence of Laura's past thefts, while I would look deeper into the dissolved tax shelters. It felt exciting to finally be taking action. As we stepped outside the cafe, Kelly held my hands, compassion in her eyes. "Stay strong, Emma," she urged. "With patience, the truth will come out. You'll clear your name. I'm sure of it." I blinked back grateful tears and hugged her. With Kelly on my side, the future didn't seem quite as dark. I didn't have to face Laura's torment alone anymore. With new strength from my partnership with Kelly, I drove home, head held high, refusing to shed another tear over Laura's schemes. She may have woven an elaborate web to ruin me, but together, Kelly and I would gather the proof to tear her lies apart. Justice would soon prevail. In the following weeks, Kelly and I quietly collected evidence. She found financial statements showing strange transfers that started right around the time of Laura's promotion. I dug deeper into the offshore accounts, following money trails that all led back to Laura. Piece by piece, we built a case that proved Laura had been embezzling funds while acting as if everything was legitimate, all to fund her luxurious lifestyle. At the same time, she tried to remove me, the one person standing in her way of complete control. With stacks of records ready, Kelly and I decided to confront Laura and Adam at the upcoming board meeting. It was time for a showdown. That morning, I dressed carefully, choosing a polished sheath dress as my armor for the battle ahead. Kelly met me outside the conference room, her files in hand and her eyes full of purpose. "Readies?" I asked with a confident smile. She squeezed my arm, encouraging me. We entered the room together, standing strong side by side. I met Laura's glare across the table, refusing to look away. For a moment, surprise flashed across her face as she saw her old rival, Kelly, but she quickly covered it with a smug smile. "Kelly, what an unexpected surprise," Laura said with fake sweetness. "I thought we said goodbye years ago." I invited her. I cut in smoothly, enjoying the way Laura's smile faltered. I wanted reliable witnesses for this conversation. Laura's eyes narrowed as curious whispers filled the room. Adam tapped his gavel. "Let's begin, shall we?" Oblivious to the tension, he ran through the regular agenda items. I barely listened, keeping my focus on Laura, who fidgeted with her flashy jewelry, probably assuming I'd brought Kelly for emotional support. She would soon learn differently. Finally, Adam finished with the budget approvals. "Any other items before we close?" he asked, glancing around. I exchanged a look with Kelly, gathering my courage. "Showtime." "Yes, actually," I said, my voice clear in the sudden silence. All eyes turned to me as I stood, smoothing my skirt and stepping forward with steady confidence. Kelly handed me a document, and I held it up for the group. As you can see in this financial statement from a now-dissolved offshore account, large amounts of money have been missing from the family company over several years. A murmur rippled through the room as everyone leaned in. I continued, laying out each transfer record, holding nothing back. Piece by solid piece, we exposed Laura's long scheme, an elaborate setup that stretched back over a decade. By the time I placed the final document on the table, the room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. I looked around, feeling vindicated as I saw the shocked and horrified faces of everyone there. But Laura only scoffed, breaking the tense silence. "Really, Emma?" she sneered. "Blaming me to cover up your own crimes is just sad." My anger flared. How could she still pretend to be innocent when all the evidence was right in front of her? But before I could speak, Kelly gave me a small shake of her head, reminding me to stay calm. She was right. I needed to keep my composure to make this case stick. I folded my hands calmly. The proof is all here. Kelly and I traced every withdrawal, every transfer, all with your signature. Laura used to drain family funds. I fixed her with a cold stare. The only question is why, and how much more you would have taken before bankrupting us all. A tense silence filled the room. I caught a flicker of doubt in Scott's expression, and others around the table looked too stunned to speak. This was my one chance to expose Laura fully. Suddenly, Laura shoved her chair back with a loud screech. "This is insane," she yelled, pointing her finger at me. Her calm mask was gone. "This liar went snooping through private records to frame me, and you're all just going along with it?" She turned to Adam, her face twisted with desperation. "Father, please, you have to see reason." "No," Adam's voice boomed, startling us all. He stood slowly, his knuckles white as he gripped the table's edge. When he looked up, his eyes blazed with anger, all signs of frailty gone. "It's you, Laura, who has lost all sense of reason." His voice was strong, filled with conviction. "The evidence is clear. You've betrayed this family's trust for the last time." Laura's mouth opened and closed, stunned and desperate. She looked around the room, as if searching for anyone to back her up, but her lies had finally caught up with her. She no longer looked like the powerful woman she tried to be, just someone caught, with nowhere left to hide. "You can't actually believe this setup," she shouted, her eyes darting between us. But her confidence was gone, replaced by panic. Adam's voice cut through her protests like steel. "The proof shows your guilt, Laura. You drained the company's funds to fuel your own selfish spending, thinking no one would notice. But justice doesn't sleep forever." "But I was protecting our future," Laura cried, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This so-called innocent was bleeding us dry behind your back. I had to take control. By robbing us blind?" Adam thundered back. I jumped, shocked by Adam's rare fury. He stepped toward Laura, who shrank back against the wall. "Your pride and greed have gone too far, but this ends now," he shouted, his anger clear. "You are hereby stripped of all authority in this company, effective immediately." A ripple of surprised murmurs filled the room, and my heart raced as his words sank in. We did it. We finally exposed Laura's lies, and she would face consequences at last. Laura's face turned pale, and for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the weeks of pain and humiliation I'd endured because of her lies. No, she deserved this. Justice was finally being served. Suddenly, Laura erupted again, her voice full of rage as she turned to the group. "You fools," she yelled. "That backstabbing fraud has tricked you all because she wants what's rightfully mine." She jabbed a shaking finger at Kelly and me. "These greedy liars set me up out of pure spite, and you believed every word." She looked desperately toward Scott. "Surely you won't let them tear apart our family, brother," she pleaded. "You know I'd never betray you like this." All eyes turned to Scott, who just sat there, his jaw clenched tightly as he looked at Laura like he didn't recognize her. I held my breath, realizing that, even though the truth was out, Scott's trust in me still felt fragile. If he chose to believe Laura now, her lies could still break us apart. After a long pause, Scott slowly stood. Laura's eyes widened with hope as the room held its breath. Then, Scott stepped toward me, his face full of resolve. He took my hands gently in his, and behind him, Laura let out a defeated gasp. "Forgive me for ever doubting you," Scott said, regret clear in his eyes. "Today, you showed more honesty and loyalty than my own sister ever has." Overwhelmed with relief, I let out a small sob, and Scott pulled me into his arms. I clung to him, tears streaming down my face, as the room filled with approving murmurs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Adam place a grateful hand on Kelly's shoulder, and she gave a small, satisfied smile. The tender moment was broken by Laura's furious scream. "You spineless fools. I sacrificed everything for this family." She grabbed wildly for a paperweight on the desk. I quickly pulled Scott behind me, but before Laura could throw it, 3 security guards rushed in, called by the receptionist after overhearing Laura's meltdown. They grabbed her as she struggled and screamed, hurling threats and insults. We all stood frozen, watching as Laura was dragged out in handcuffs, her makeup smeared, and her face twisted with rage. The heavy doors closed behind her, sealing her fate. A stunned silence filled the room. It was finally over. I felt my heartbeat slow as a deep sense of relief washed over me. I turned slowly to Scott, feeling joy and gratitude rise inside me like a healing balm. With Laura gone, justice served, and the family reunited, the future looked bright for all of us. In the weeks after Laura's dramatic fall, the family business slowly began to recover. With Laura out and the stolen funds returned, hope grew for a prosperous future. As more details about Laura's schemes came to light, I felt sickened. Not only had she secretly taken large amounts into private accounts, but she had also taken out huge loans in the business's name to fund her luxury lifestyle. No wonder the company had been on the edge of ruin. With this betrayal fully exposed, Adam pressed charges, making sure Laura would answer for her crimes. Last we heard, she was facing over a decade in prison. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel some relief knowing she would finally face the consequences. On a personal level, Scott and I focused on rebuilding our trust. We took long evening walks, talking openly and honestly, just like newlyweds again. Scott even mentioned wanting to take on a larger role in the company, which filled me with hope for a future where I could stand proudly by his side as his partner. Scott and Adam also welcomed Kelly back with open arms, finally realizing how valuable her experience was. They offered her a high position in charge of finances, which she accepted with well-deserved satisfaction. I couldn't blame her for enjoying the moment. Laura had kept her from getting the credit she deserved for too long. As for me, when Scott asked what I planned to do now that things had settled, my answer surprised even me. The idea came suddenly. Why not use what I'd learned about uncovering fraud to help others? I decided to take some courses to train as an independent financial crimes consultant. By day, I studied, and in the evenings, Scott and I would talk business ideas over home-cooked dinners. After all the turmoil, our home was finally full of hope for the future again. One sunny afternoon, about 4 months later, I heard relaxed laughter coming from the veranda. I walked outside to find Scott and Adam chatting excitedly over some papers with a company logo. They both looked up with warm smiles. "Pull up a chair, darling," Scott said with a bright smile. "We were just talking about expanding the international sales division based on that idea you suggested. Adam thinks it shows real promise." I blinked, surprised and touched. Not only had Scott remembered our late-night conversation, but he also took my ideas seriously. Scott gently pulled me into a chair between him and Adam as we continued to dream together about the future, now with Kelly helping secure our finances and a new sense of possibility in every plan. "I can focus on strategic growth," Scott said, "and I was hoping you might lead market research for our expansion into Central Europe." My eyebrows shot up as I turned to Adam. He looked at me steadily over his glasses. "It was sharp of you to see the potential in those growing economies," he said. "You have exactly the grit and insight needed to open new doors." I shook my head in amazement. Just a few months ago, in the middle of all the chaos, I would never have imagined stepping into such an important role in the family company. But Kelly was right. Persevering through hard times brings its own rewards. "We make quite a team," Scott said, his eyes twinkling as he raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Adam and I raised our glasses as well, smiling as they clinked together in unity after so much division. Looking at their hopeful faces, my heart filled with gratitude. Laura had tried to tear this family apart out of jealousy, but in the end, we came out stronger and closer than ever. As we sipped the cool, sweet wine, a sense of peace washed over me. The future felt full of light and new possibilities, both for the family and the business. Everything was finally well again.